Hello everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my reading wrap-up for everything I read in April. This month I read 6 books, so definitely a little bit less than I read last month. But overall I just had a lot of life stuff going on from the end of March through the beginning of April, so I wasn't really focused on reading that much. Also, I haven't been listening to as many audiobooks as I usually do. Usually I listen to them pretty frequently when I'm commuting to work, or on my lunch break, or just have other free time. But lately I just haven't found a lot of audiobooks that I'm really interested in, or I don't have access to audiobooks that are for the physical books that I was reading, so I didn't have the option to tandem read them. And since I've just been sticking to physical reading, I think that's another reason why I haven't read as much this month. But overall, I am pretty happy with all the books I did read. So let's go ahead and talk about those books now. I'm gonna go in kind of no particular order for these. But the first one I wanted to talk about is one that I included in my Wife Picks My TBR reading vlog, and that was The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is the third and final book in the Folk of the Air trilogy. That is a YA fantasy trilogy that follows our main character, Jude Duarte, who is a human that has been raised and living in the Fae world, and her very tumultuous relationship with the Fae Prince Cardin. There's a lot of drama, a lot of political intrigue. It matches both schoolyard teen drama with a lot of high fantasy court politics stuff. Overall I gave this book 4 stars, which is less than I gave the previous 2 books in the series. I still really did enjoy it, especially in the very end. But I think that some of the elements in it just weren't as dramatic or as fast-paced as it had been in previous books. I think the part where this book really shines is in all of the characters and a lot of the different character dynamics that we've seen grow and change over the course of the story. It was really good to see a lot of scenes with Jude and her sisters, just kind of them making up for some of the fights and misunderstandings they'd had in previous books. And of course there was the great relationship of Jude and Cardin. I feel like Cardin is one of the characters that changes the most throughout the series, being so cruel and heartless in The Cruel Prince, hence the name. But now, by The Queen of Nothing, he has fully accepted Jude as his equal. And even more so that I think he knows that Jude is a lot better than him in a lot of aspects, and he's more than willing to defer to her to be the expert in things. And overall just giving a lot of wife guy energy. Separate from the story, I just really like Holly Black's writing style. I feel like she has a good way of making action scenes feel very intense and well-paced. And also Caitlin Kelly as the audiobook narrator does a really good job in giving a lot of emotionality to Jude, and does a lot of really good voices for all of these side characters as well. Overall, I really did enjoy this series and would recommend it to people. And I'm definitely going to be reading the sequel duology of The Stolen Heir and The Prisoner's Throne in the near future. Okay, the next book I wanted to talk about is Blood SisterScribe by Emily Torsch. This book is an adult fantasy that follows 2 sisters, Esther and Joanna, who are part of a family that's been keeping this secret collection of magical books throughout the generations. Esther has left home 10 years ago and was told by their father before he passed that every single year she has to travel for a full 24 hours in order to keep herself safe. But this year while she's working in Antarctica, she's like, maybe people probably can't get me here. I think I'm going to try and stay an extra year to continue my job and be with the girl that I've fallen in love with. But her deciding to stay put sets in motion a chain reaction of other magic users trying to seek her out and getting her involved in this larger plot regarding magic that her parents had been involved in before their untimely deaths. This book I read for Kitty's Readings Patreon buddy read, and I ended up giving it a 2.5 stars. I do think that was a little harsh because there was a lot of the parts in this book that I did enjoy, but overall this book was so slow and poorly paced. I'm not joking when I say it takes at least 40% of the way through this book before anything really of note happened and for the plot to actually start moving. My other major issue is that I feel like the magic is honestly kind of lame and not very impressive. I do think there were some interesting elements regarding the blood magic and connection to the books, but it seems like a lot of the effects of the books are kind of useless. So I'm not really sure why exactly they're that valuable to people. I do really like all of the dynamics between the main characters, but it took literally half the book for us to really get an idea of what the main plot was going to be and who the antagonist was, and to have all of the members of the group finally meet up and start working together. I really liked this one character, Nicholas's plot line and his relationship with his bodyguard Collins. Another positive thing I want to mention is that Nicholas has a dog who is named Sir Kiwi, who is a female Pomeranian. Have you ever heard of a more perfect creature? This book is a debut for the author, and I definitely remember reading a review for this book that said that a lot of the pacing makes it feel like this is the first of the series with all the setup that it does, but this book is intended to be a standalone. And I feel like unless this was going to be building to something bigger in a longer series, it does come across as a lot of too little too late to give me anything really of value. So yes, I'm giving this book a 2.5 stars. I do think Emily Torch is a good writer, and if she fixes her pacing issues, I definitely could see myself reading another book of hers in the future. Okay, the next 3 books I'm going to talk about are all ones I read in my finishing series reading vlog that came out last week. The first one I wanted to talk about is A Power Unbound by Freya Marske. This is the 3rd and final book in the Last Binding trilogy, which is an adult fantasy romance series set in Edwardian London that follows a bunch of magicians that are trying to find these magical MacGuffin artifacts that are connected to all of the magic in England. This one in particular has the main characters of Jack, aka Lord Hawthorne, who is a side character we've met in the previous 2 books, and his relationship with Alan, who is a character we met in the last book. All of these books have kind of a trope where one character is a magician and the other person is a seemingly non-magical person who then gets revealed to have a magical element about them. In this one, it happens to be that Alan is kind of like completely unaffected by magic. It kind of just like bounces off of him whenever someone uses magic on him. So they strike up a deal where Alan is going to help them infiltrate this magical house since they think that he can get past a lot of the wards there in order to find the magical item that's hidden inside. And as payment for that, he's asking Jack to kind of help him get a stable job and use his connections in high society. So it's a lot of like forced proximity, them bonding for the sake of the mission, and them thinking they don't like each other in the beginning because of like preconceived notions they have for the other person. But then of course they bond and fall in love over the course of the story. Things I knew going into this book was 1, pain, and 2, because Freya Marske I think said so in an interview that this book was going to have a lot of kink. What I got was like a secret third thing of those 2, but also like just a great character-focused, found family vibes, and like a well-rounded ending to a series that I really love. I knew I was going to like lose my damn mind over Hawthorne's story because he is my favorite character, and I definitely did, but I also grew to love Alan a lot more than this book than I had initially expected. Basically all of the side characters I grew to like a lot more, even from when I saw them in their original stories. I just feel like seeing the entire crew was just so amazing and made me like nostalgic for seeing them again. I think this book did a good job of like pacing the overarching plot and adding the romance in, and making them seem both very interesting and like fit in well with the overall pacing of the story. I feel like this book definitely cemented that Freya Marske is like a favorite author of mine, and I'll probably check out any book she has coming out in the future. Actually, I say that, but I've literally already pre-ordered her book that's coming out in October of this year. Okay, the next book I wanted to talk about is A Case of Possession by KJ Charles. This is the 2nd book in the Charm of Magpie series, which is a very, very similar plot or like setup as the Last Binding series, in that it is also a queer historical fantasy set in Victorian England that follows magicians. As I've mentioned in my finishing series vlog, I feel like the Charm of Magpie series and the Last Binding series are very similar. Whereas The Last Binding is like a trilogy of fantasy movies, the Charm of Magpies is more like a episodic action TV show. I feel like I like this one a little bit less than I did the previous book in the series, just because I felt like it was a little bit more rambling and not as focused as the first one was. This one definitely was a little bit more smutty than the first one was, which I'm not mad about. But I do feel like it was somewhat confusing in like what elements that were being discussed were going to become relevant for like the final confrontation. But overall I did like it and gave it 4 stars. And I'm super excited to finally read the last book in this series in the near future. Okay, the last book I read in my finishing series reading vlog was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. This is the 2nd book in the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies series, and it follows our main character Emily Wilde and her academic rival turned love interest Wendell Bambleby as they are going on an expedition to find a specific type of fairy door that will lead them to a special fae realm. Overall, this book is a really cute adult cozy fantasy. I feel like Wendell and Emily have such good chemistry and banter. I feel like a lot of people are looking for a book that captures the magic of Howl's Moving Castle in the relationship of Howl and Sophie, and I feel like no one is doing it better than these guys are. You really just need a very like plain Jane but autistic coded woman and the hot magical man who is obsessed but also beguiled by her. I feel like the series overall really shines in its presentation of fae, not just like hot human like courtly fae, but also the common fae that are like weird amalgamations of animals and human like traits that just become all types of weird and spooky. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I'm gonna give 4 stars. I gave the previous one in the series 4.5 stars. And I do think it missed a little bit of like the charm and like drama that happened in the previous book, but there still were a lot of things in this that I really, really enjoyed. We were reintroduced to a side character from the previous book who I kind of had completely forgotten about, if I'm being honest. But I feel like his introduction here made me like him so much more, and I kind of want to reread the previous book to see like his introduction to the story all over again. Overall, I really like the series, and I definitely am excited to read the 3rd one when it comes out next year. Okay, we're on to the last book I read in April, and that is The Alchemy of Moonlight by David Ferrero. This is a YA historical fantasy horror that is a queer retelling of The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. It follows our main character Emil, who is on the run from his abusive aunt, who has found out that he's gay and is trying to force him into an asylum unless he marries a woman and produces an heir, like she thinks he should as a proper member of the nobility. Instead, he is now masquerading as a valet at the estate of Count Montoni, and he kind of has a love triangle situation going on with the local Dr. Brahm, as well as the nephew of the Count, who is Henry Morano. There was also an added supernatural element of a lot of strange murders happening on the estate that are being said to be caused by an animal attack, but later we start to think that it possibly might be the work of a supernatural force, perhaps even a werewolf. This book I definitely liked, but I wasn't as enthralled with it as I thought I would be. I think this has very similar issues I had to Teach the Torches to Burn, where I liked the plot and like where everything was going, but I felt like the characters were a little bit one note and not super strong on like having individual personalities. Maybe that's just me physically reading it, and if I had listened to the audiobook and heard like the narrator's like different inflections for all the characters, I would find them a little bit more distinctive, but I just wasn't super impressed with the character work in this book. It also definitely took a really long time for like the werewolf aspect of the plot to really come to fruition. And we really only get to see them and like learn more about the lore in like the last 70 pages of this book. And I just felt like the beginning part was both insta-lovey but also like very tedious in like the relationship dynamics that were going on. I do think that it showed a little bit of character growth for certain characters, but at the same time I kind of was like side-eyeing Emil and a lot of his choices. I'm not really sure where I'm going to land on this. I kind of am in between a 3 and a 3.5 stars. 3.5 stars means I enjoyed it, but I do think that there's some flaws with it. And 3 stars is usually like, I think this book is good, but it's not really a book for me. I think I'll have to wait a while and see if like this book really sticks with me in my memory, because if it doesn't, it probably will just be a book I give 3 stars to. So that is a look at all the books I read in April. I also want to mention now a couple like general life stuff related to my reading. The first one was that I have been doing a lot more book events. We went to see Mark Z. Danielewski talk at the end of March, and I got my copy of House of Leaves signed, and it was such like an amazing experience. I took a lot of notes from the talks I saw him give, but overall the vibes were very much that it seems he cares a lot about imagination and like the freedom to be creative, which I do really think comes through in his works and how strange and innovative they are. We also went to Amanda Mottell's live show in Philly on the 16th of April. We ended up doing the VIP meet and greet, which we didn't really know what that was going to entail, but part of it I knew was that it came with a free copy of her new book. So I ended up getting this in April, and I'm super excited to finally read it. I'm waiting for the audiobook to come in because Amanda Mottell also does the narration for this one, but I'm definitely going to be reading this soon. And then for the rest of my book buying updates, in April I bought 3 books. One was the Dazzling Bookish Shop subscription for May, and then right in the beginning of the month we ended up having to go to the Midwest for not really a fun thing, but to make it more of a fun thing, my wife and her sibling decided to seek out a half-price books since we can't find them at all on the East Coast. I didn't get anything at half price, but we also did go to a Barnes & Noble while we were there. I ended up getting the Barnes & Noble exclusive editions of The Stolen Heir and The Prisoner's Throne. I was on the fence about if I was going to eventually collect any books in the Folk of the Air series, but once The Prisoner's Throne came out and I found out who was narrating the audiobook, I knew I had to get a physical copy of it because the audiobook narrator for The Prisoner's Throne is our friend Barrett Letty, and I absolutely am so excited to listen to the audiobook and hear him be a Greenbrier. That's literally so insane to me. But I just wanted to have the physical copies to kind of represent my overall love of the series. So yes, that is my full wrap up for April, and that is going to be it from me today. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time. Consider also following my Bookstagram, which is linked in the description. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!